parents insisted that I use the $30,000 I had saved for college to help my golden child sister buy an apartment. Hey, so I'm a 19-year-old guy in college, and honestly, my relationship with my family has always been kinda rocky. I'm pretty different from them, and that's always been a big thing. I've busted my butt to get where I am. Good grades, a scholarship, the whole 9 yards. I figured all that hard work would finally get me some respect, but nope. My parents have always had a soft spot for my sister Sarah. She's 24, acts spoiled, entitled, and basically gets whatever she wants without lifting a finger. It's been obvious for a while now that she's their golden child, and I'm just the responsible one who's expected to clean up her messes. When she screws up, I'm the one who has to make sacrifices. I've managed to save up $30,000 for college, which wasn't a walk in the park. I earned most of it through part-time gigs and scholarships. This money is my ticket to independence, but for my parents, it was just another piggy bank to crack open. So here's the kicker. Sarah's unemployed, hasn't worked in ages, and spends her time lounging around. Despite that, she decided she needed a fancy new apartment in a nice part of town. Obviously, she has no money for it. One night, my parents sat me down and demanded that I fork over my entire $30,000 college savings to cover her deposit. I mean, they didn't even ask, they straight up demanded. And then, they hit me with the ultimatum. If I refused, I could pack my stuff and leave. They made it clear that my future was less important than Sarah's comfort. My mom played the family comes first card, and my dad said something about how Sarah had always been there for me, which is total BS. They tried to guilt-trip me, saying that if I was a good brother, I'd just give in. At first, I was in total shock and couldn't even respond. I asked them how they could think it was fair to take everything I'd worked for and give it to Sarah, who had done zilch to help herself. My dad just shrugged and said it was about keeping the family together, while my mom said Sarah needed this apartment more than I needed my savings. That's when it hit me. They didn't care about fairness, just about making Sarah happy. The next few days were a nightmare, constantly weighing my options. I thought about giving in just to avoid being kicked out, but the more I considered it, the more wrong it felt. Why should I sacrifice everything for Sarah's laziness? But standing my ground meant risking everything. I didn't have anywhere to go if they kicked me out. I even thought about reaching out to extended family, but they're just as duped by Sarah as my parents. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to let them push me around. I researched my legal rights and realized they couldn't just take my money. I secured all my important documents and even started secretly packing my valuables, moving them to a friend's place. I knew I had to be ready for the worst-case scenario. I reached out to my college's housing office about emergency accommodations. They didn't have anything, but they pointed me to some local resources. When I confronted my parents, I was firm. I told them no way was I giving up my savings, and if they wanted me out, I'd leave. My dad got furious, accusing me of being selfish, while my mom started crying, saying I was tearing the family apart over a little money. If it was just a little money, why don't they pay for it then? Sarah, of course, threw a tantrum, claiming I was ruining her life. The next few days were hell. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was to throw guilt my way. My mom gave me the silent treatment, and my dad made snide comments. Sarah acted like I'd personally betrayed her. Despite the hostility, I kept preparing to leave. I moved the rest of my stuff to my friend's place and made arrangements to stay with them if needed. I even told some other friends what was going on, and they offered their support and suggested I look into legal action if things got worse. The breaking point came when I found out my parents had tried to access my bank account. They thought they could just take the money and deal with the aftermath later, but I was ahead of them. I'd already emptied the account and closed it. When they realized what I'd done, they were livid. My dad yelled at me, calling me ungrateful, while my mom cried, asking how I could do this to them. But I didn't back down. I told them they'd crossed a line, and I was done being their scapegoat. If they wanted me gone, I'd leave, but they weren't getting a single cent of my money. So I realized that leaving quietly would just let them twist the story however they wanted. So I decided to take charge. I posted a super detailed account of what went down on social media, including how they tried to force me to hand over my savings, the threats, and all the emotional blackmail. I even shared screenshots of their texts and the bank alerts showing their attempts to access my account. To make sure the message was loud and clear, I tagged not just my parents and sister, but also their friends and some extended family members. I wanted everyone to know the real story. The reaction was immediate and intense. Most people were on my side, offering support and calling out my parents and sister for their shady behavior. Some relatives reached out, shocked and disappointed by what they were hearing. They had no clue things were this bad. A few folks, mainly my parents' close friends, tried to defend them, but their voices were quickly drowned out by the criticism. Word spread fast. My parents' colleagues and friends started distancing themselves, and I heard that Sarah's plans for her new apartment fell through when the landlord found out what was happening. She was furious, blaming me for ruining her life. But honestly, I didn't care. They brought this on themselves. The fallout was brutal for my parents. Their carefully crafted image as the perfect family was shattered. My dad's work relationships took a hit as his colleagues began to see him differently. My mom, who always prided herself on her social standing, found herself being quietly excluded from her usual circles. And Sarah, she lost her chance at the apartment she wanted so badly, and no one was quick to offer her another one. After the whole showdown, I moved in with a supportive friend. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but it was way better than staying in that toxic environment. Adjusting to independence was tough, but also incredibly freeing. I could finally focus on my studies and my future without constantly worrying about what my family might try to take from me next. My parents didn't handle the fallout well at all. They bombarded my phone with calls and messages, swinging between threats and desperate pleas for me to take down the post and come back home. They even tried to twist the story, claiming I overreacted and that they were just trying to help Sarah out of a tough spot. But by then, it was too late. Everyone knew the truth. I decided to go no contact. I blocked them on all platforms and made sure they couldn't reach me. I even sought legal advice about potentially getting a restraining order if they didn't back off. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I couldn't let them drag me down anymore. In the aftermath, a few estranged relatives reached out, offering their help and expressing regret for not stepping in sooner. My college even offered additional financial aid after hearing about my situation, which was a huge relief. Through all of this, I've grown a lot. I'm more confident and self-reliant than ever before. My academic performance has actually improved now that I'm not constantly stressed about my family. I've also made new friends and built a support network that I can truly rely on. Looking ahead, I'm focused on achieving complete financial independence. I'm also seriously considering cutting ties with my family for good. The cycle of toxicity has gone on long enough, and I'm committed to breaking it. It's not going to be easy, but I'm determined to build a better future for myself, one where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. So, Reddit, what do you think? Am I wrong for refusing to give up my college savings to my sister, and for going public with what my family tried to do to me? Update 1. It's been about 3 months since I posted my original story, and a lot has happened. Thank you all for your support and advice. It really helped me get through some tough times. After I moved out and went public with what happened, things got pretty crazy. My parents and Sarah didn't take it well at all. They kept trying to contact me, switching between angry threats and guilt tripping. I stayed firm with my no-contact rule, but it wasn't easy. About a week after I left, my mom showed up at my friend's place where I was staying. I have no idea how she found out where I was. She was crying and begging me to come home, saying they'd made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I almost felt bad for her, but then she started in on how I was tearing the family apart and how Sarah was suffering because of me. That's when I knew nothing had really changed. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She left, but not before saying I was breaking her heart. The next day, my dad called my college trying to get information about my classes and schedule. Luckily, I'd already talked to the administration about my situation, so they didn't give him anything. But it freaked me out that he was trying to track me down like that. Things escalated when Sarah started showing up at places she knew I frequented: the library, the coffee shop near campus, even outside some of my classes. She'd try to corner me, alternating between screaming at me for ruining her life and begging me to give her the money. It got so bad that I had to change my routines and ask friends to walk with me between classes. About a month after I left, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. She said she wanted to meet up and talk. I was hesitant, but she had always been kind to me, so I agreed to meet her in a public place. When I got there, I found out my parents had put her up to it, and they were hiding at a nearby table, waiting for me. I felt so betrayed. I left immediately and blocked my aunt's number too. The social media fallout continued. My parents tried to do damage control by posting their own version of events, claiming I was a troubled kid who had stolen money from them and run away. Some people believed them, but most saw through it. It was hard seeing family friends and distant relatives take sides, but I was grateful for those who stood by me. Sarah took it to another level. She started a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was a victim of financial abuse and needed help to escape a toxic family situation. She used my name in it, twisting the story to make it sound like I was the abuser. I had to get a lawyer involved to get the campaign taken down. Speaking of lawyers, my parents threatened legal action against me. They claimed I owed them money for raising me and that they had a right to it. Man, when I first saw my savings, it was so ridiculous that it freaked me out enough to get some legal advice. The lawyer assured me I was in the clear, but he still advised me to document everything, just in case. So, like 2.5 months after I left, I got this unexpected email from Jack, Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They had split up a few months before everything went down, and I always thought he was a decent dude who just got caught up in the family drama. He apologized for not reaching out sooner and said he totally had my back. Jack dropped some bombshells about Sarah that blew my mind. Apparently, she'd been cheating on him the whole time they were together, mainly with guys who could spoil her with expensive stuff or take her on fancy trips. She was always moaning about how she deserved a more luxurious lifestyle and how unfair it was that she had to work for anything. That totally made her behavior make way more sense. Then Jack mentioned that Sarah got fired from her last job for stealing, but my parents covered it up by paying back the money she took, just to keep the company from pressing charges. I was seething. They expected me to give up my savings while covering up for her? Unbelievable. About 3 months after I left, I got this random call from a number I didn't recognize. Turned out, it was my grandfather, my dad's dad. We were never close since he lived in another state, and we barely saw each other. He had heard about the drama from a cousin and wanted my side of the story. I was a bit wary, considering all the trust issues, but he genuinely seemed concerned. He even admitted he had his own issues with my dad over the years and was not shocked by the whole mess. He apologized for not being around more and even offered to help me financially if I needed it. I was really touched, but I told him I wanted to do it on my own. He respected that but left the offer open, which meant a lot. It felt good to know someone in the family was in my corner. That convo with my grandpa made me curious about other family members I had lost touch with, so I reached out to a couple of cousins on my mom's side. One of them, Megan, really opened up. She told me she had her own issues with my parents and Sarah over the years. Megan shared something that made me so angry. A few years ago, while going through a tough divorce, she needed a place to stay. My parents initially offered to let her stay with them, but then Sarah complained about her invading her space. They kicked Megan out after just 3 days, leaving her to crash on friends' couches until she found an apartment. I couldn't believe they'd pull something like that while demanding I sacrifice everything for Sarah. While all this was unfolding, I was still trying to sort out my living situation. My friends' parents were kind enough to let me crash at their place, but I knew it wasn't a long-term solution. I started hunting for a cheap apartment near campus, but everything was out of my budget. Then one day, I ran into one of Sarah's friends at the grocery store. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying Sarah was depressed, and it was all my fault. I asked if she knew the whole story, and when she admitted she only knew Sarah's side, I filled her in on my version. I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. She walked away looking confused, and honestly, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The next day, I got a call from the bank. Someone had tried to access my new account using my social security number. The bank flagged it as suspicious and blocked it. I knew instantly it had to be my parents. I filed a police report and started the process of freezing my credit. I was shaken, realizing just how far they were willing to go. It was time to take more serious action. I went back to the lawyer and started the process of getting a restraining order against my parents and Sarah. It felt drastic, but I had no choice. The day before the hearing, my mom called, crying and begging me not to go through with it. She said it would destroy the family and ruin their lives. I told her they should have thought of that before trying to steal from me and harass me, and I hung up. The hearing was intense. My parents and Sarah showed up with their lawyer, trying to paint me as an ungrateful, troubled kid lashing out. But I had receipts, texts, emails, social media posts, and bank records. The judge saw through their nonsense and granted the restraining order. As I was leaving the courthouse, Sarah tried to approach me, looking awful, like she hadn't slept in days. She started to apologize, but then twisted her face in anger and spat out, "I hope you're happy now that you've ruined all our lives." One of her friends stepped in and led her away. That was the last time I saw her. I've also been looking for a part-time job to help cover my living expenses. Balancing work and school is tough, but being independent feels pretty awesome. I'm determined to make it on my own. Not gonna lie, the past few months have been rough. Sometimes I miss having a family, even if they were dysfunctional. Holidays are especially tough. That's where things stand now. I'm still processing everything that happened, but moving forward. Final update. It's been about a year since my last update, and I can't believe how much has changed. Thanks to everyone for the support. It's meant more than you know. After the restraining order, things were quiet for a while, and I thought my family had finally gotten it. But, calm before the storm and all that. About 3 months ago, I got an unexpected call from my uncle, my dad's brother. We were never close, but he sounded genuinely concerned. He told me things had spiraled out of control with my parents and Sarah. Apparently, Sarah got involved with some shady people and owes them a lot of money. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, took out a second mortgage to pay off my sister Sarah's debts, but it wasn't enough. One night, the people she owed money to showed up at my parents' house, and things got ugly. My uncle said the police were involved, and my dad ended up in the hospital with a broken arm. Despite everything, my parents are still trying to protect Sarah. They told the police it was a random break-in, but the real story got out to the family. A few days after my uncle's call, my parents started messaging me again. I unblocked them because, well, they're my parents. Big mistake. They were begging me to come home, saying they needed my help, and even tried to guilt-trip me by saying none of this would have happened if I'd just given them the money they initially asked for. Can you believe that? They're still trying to make this my fault. I ignored their messages. I've managed to save enough to move into a better apartment in a more secure building, although it's further from campus. But then Sarah showed up at my apartment, ignoring the restraining order. I have no idea how she found out where I live. She was a mess, crying and begging for money, saying she was in danger. I told her to leave or I'd call the cops. She screamed that I was killing her, and if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. It was awful. I called my lawyer, and we're working on extending the restraining order to include my current address. I've also informed my landlord and neighbors about the situation, just in case Sarah or my parents try anything. On top of all this, I found out my parents have been telling everyone that I got Sarah into trouble, saying I introduced her to these shady people and that I owe them money too. It's complete nonsense, but some relatives believe it. I've had to block a bunch of people on social media because of the hateful messages. I've made some great friends over the past year. They've become like a chosen family to me. We're planning a celebration together soon. As for my parents and Sarah, I've heard they're facing foreclosure on the house. Part of me feels bad, but I know they brought this on themselves. I can't help but think how different things could have been if they had just respected my boundaries. That's where things stand now. Thanks again for all your support. I couldn't have done it without you.